The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Carter mansion like liquid gold, casting soft shadows across the marble floors that Gloria had just polished. She moved quietly through the grand hallways, her worn sneakers barely making a sound. At 43 years old, Gloria Washington had cleaned these floors for nearly 8 years, and she knew every corner of this house better than her own modest apartment across town. She hummed softly as she worked, an old gospel tune her grandmother used to sing. The melody kept her company in the vast, silent spaces of the home. Mr. Michael Carter, the owner, was a tech billionaire whose name appeared in Forbes magazine and on business news channels. But to Gloria, he was simply a kind man who always remembered to say good morning and asked about her daughter's college applications. His son, 7-year-old Danny, was the real sunshine in this mansion. The boy would come bounding down the stairs each morning, his backpack bouncing, always stopping to give Gloria a high five before school. "Morning, Miss Gloria," he'd call out, his gap-toothed smile lighting up the foyer. She'd started keeping his favorite granola bars in her cleaning cart, just in case he forgot breakfast in his rush. But lately, something had shifted in the house. Mr. Carter's business partner, a sharp-suited man named Richard Brennan, had been visiting more frequently. Gloria noticed the tension in Mr. Carter's shoulders during their meetings, the way his voice would drop to urgent whispers behind closed office doors. She wasn't one to eavesdrop, but sometimes voices carried through the ventilation system while she cleaned the upstairs hallway. That particular Tuesday morning felt different. Mr. Carter had left unusually early, before Danny even woke up. The nanny, a young woman named Ashley, seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone with a worried expression. Gloria went about her duties, dusting the bookshelves in the library, when she heard the front door open with unusual force. Heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer. Gloria peered around the corner and felt her stomach drop. 4 police officers stood in the entrance, their faces stern and official. Behind them, Richard Brennan wore an expression that made Gloria's skin crawl, something between triumph and cold calculation. "We have a warrant for the arrest of Michael Carter," the lead officer announced to Ashley, who had rushed downstairs, "and we need to secure the premises for investigation." Gloria's hands trembled as she gripped her dust cloth. From upstairs, she heard Danny's small voice calling out, confused and scared, "Where's my dad? I want my dad." Everything Gloria knew about justice and fairness told her something was terribly wrong. She'd watched Mr. Carter with his son, seen his integrity in small daily moments. Whatever was happening, whatever Richard Brennan had set in motion, it reeked of betrayal. And in that moment, watching the officers begin to search the home while Danny cried upstairs, Gloria made a silent promise. She wouldn't stand by and watch an innocent man destroyed, or let that precious child suffer. Not if she could help it. The police left with boxes of files and Mr. Carter's personal computer. But the real damage was just beginning. Gloria stayed late that day, long after her shift should have ended. Someone needed to be there for Danny, and Ashley seemed too overwhelmed to provide comfort. The nanny kept making phone calls, speaking in hushed tones, and Gloria noticed she was packing her belongings. By evening, the news broke. Gloria watched on the kitchen television as reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Tech billionaire Michael Carter arrested on charges of embezzlement and fraud, the anchor announced with grave authority. Sources say he allegedly stole over $50 million from his own company, Innovate Tech Solutions, leaving investors and employees devastated. Gloria felt sick. She'd seen Mr. Carter work late into the night, watched him take business calls during dinner, noticed the stress lines deepen around his eyes these past months. This wasn't a man stealing from his company. This was a man fighting to save it. Danny appeared in the kitchen doorway, his eyes red and swollen. "Miss Gloria, why did the police take my daddy?" She knelt down to his level, her heart breaking. "Sometimes, honey, people get confused about the truth. But your daddy loves you more than anything in this world. You remember that, okay?" The boy nodded, clutching his stuffed elephant. "When's he coming home?" "Soon as he can, baby. Soon as he can." But Gloria knew it wouldn't be soon. Over the next few days, she learned more from the news reports and whispered conversations she wasn't meant to hear. Richard Brennan had been Mr. Carter's partner for 15 years. He'd presented evidence to the board, forged documents, falsified records, fabricated email trails, all pointing to Mr. Carter as the mastermind behind the company's missing funds. The truth was uglier. Gloria had overheard enough meetings to understand that Richard had been the one pushing risky investments, making questionable deals. And when those deals started failing, he'd needed a scapegoat. Mr. Carter had discovered the discrepancies and confronted him privately, trying to handle it quietly to protect the company and its employees. That had been his mistake, giving Richard time to turn the tables. Ashley quit 3 days after the arrest. "I can't work in a house under investigation," she told Gloria coldly, as if Mr. Carter's alleged crimes somehow tainted the very walls. "They're not paying me enough for this drama." So Gloria stayed. She moved into the guest room, telling her own daughter that she couldn't leave Danny alone. Social services had temporarily allowed him to remain in his home under supervision, pending family court hearings. Gloria became that supervision, unpaid and unasked. But morally bound. At night, she'd hear Danny crying in his room. She'd sit on the edge of his bed, rubbing his back until he fell asleep, the same way she'd comforted her own children years ago. "Your daddy's a good man," she'd whisper. "And good men don't stay down forever." But even as she spoke those words, doubt crept in. Mr. Carter's bail had been set impossibly high, $10 million. His assets were frozen pending investigation. His lawyers, expensive and smooth-talking, seemed more interested in protecting themselves than mounting a real defense. Richard Brennan had been thorough, and the system was already treating Mr. Carter as guilty. Gloria knew she was just a housekeeper. She had no legal training, no connections, no power in this world of billionaires and boardrooms. But she had eyes that had seen the truth and a heart that wouldn't let an innocent man fall without a fight. She just had to figure out how. One woman with nothing could stand against a man who'd stolen. Everything. Gloria started paying attention in ways she never had before. She'd always been a woman who kept her head down and did her work, believing that staying invisible was safer. But invisibility, she realized, also meant people forgot you were watching. Richard Brennan came to the house often now, always with lawyers and accountants, claiming he needed to review company documents stored in Mr. Carter's home office. He walked through the halls like he already owned the place, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble. He barely acknowledged Gloria's presence, speaking over her as if she were a piece of furniture. But furniture hears everything. "The judge is sympathetic to our timeline," one lawyer said during a meeting in the dining room. Gloria was in the adjacent butler's pantry, organizing china. "With the evidence we've presented, Carter won't see daylight for 20 years. Richard's laugh was sharp and satisfied. "Good. I've already started preliminary talks with the board about restructuring. By the time this goes to trial, I'll have full control." Gloria's hands stilled on the teacup she was holding. So that was it. This wasn't just about covering up Richard's crimes. This was a complete takeover. Remove Mr. Carter, take his company, leave his son orphaned. Her jaw tightened. That evening, after Danny was asleep, Gloria did something she'd never done before. She went into Mr. Carter's office, now technically a crime scene that had been released back to the house, and started looking. She wasn't sure what she was searching for, only that Richard had been too confident, too smug. People that confident usually got sloppy somewhere. She found the first thread purely by accident. Behind Mr. Carter's desk was a framed photo of Danny at his 5th birthday party. Gloria had been there that day, had helped set up the decorations. She remembered Mr. Carter taking that photo, remembered his joy. Now the frame sat crooked, probably knocked aside during the police search. When she straightened it, she noticed the back panel was loose. Inside was a USB drive, taped carefully to the cardboard backing. Her heart raced. She knew she shouldn't take it, knew this could be evidence. But something made her slip it into her pocket. At home that night, she plugged it into her old laptop, a graduation gift from her daughter 3 years ago that she barely knew how to use beyond email. The drive contained copies of emails, financial records, meeting notes. She couldn't understand most of the business language, but certain phrases jumped out. Unauthorized transfers, Richard's offshore accounts, need to investigate before going public. Mr. Carter had known. He'd been building a case against Richard before the arrest. This was his insurance policy, his proof. And somehow, Richard hadn't found it. Gloria realized this made her dangerous. If Richard knew she had this information, if he even suspected. She thought of Danny sleeping upstairs, of how easily powerful men made problems disappear. But she also thought of Mr. Carter sitting in a jail cell, probably believing everyone had abandoned him. She thought of all the times he'd treated her with dignity when others looked through her. She thought of 7-year-old Danny asking every morning when his daddy was coming home. The next day, Richard came to the house again, this time with movers. "We need to clear out the office," he told Gloria dismissively. "Company property needs to be secured." Mr. Carter's lawyer said nothing should be moved without court approval, Gloria said quietly. Standing in the office doorway, Richard turned to her, really looking at her for the first time. His eyes were cold, calculating. "I'm sorry, what's your name again?" "Gloria Washington, sir. I've worked here 8 years. "Well, Gloria, I don't think a housekeeper understands the legal complexities here. This is company property in a fraud investigation. Now, if you'll step aside." "No, sir." The word hung in the air. The movers stopped. Richard's expression shifted from dismissive to dangerous. "Excuse me?" Gloria's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "I've been caring for Danny since his father was arrested. Social services put me as responsible adult in this home. Nothing gets removed without proper authorization. That's the law, sir." It was a small victory, and it wouldn't last. Richard made a phone call, spoke in clipped tones, then left with his movers, promising they'd return with proper paperwork. But as he passed Gloria in the doorway, he paused. "Be careful, Gloria Washington. Sometimes people who get involved in things beyond their understanding get hurt." It wasn't quite a threat, but it was close enough. That night, Gloria made copies of everything on the USB drive. She didn't know yet what she'd do with the information, didn't know who to trust. But she knew one thing for certain: she'd just made herself Richard Brannon's enemy. And somehow, that felt like the most right thing she'd done in years. 3 weeks after the arrest, Mr. Carter's sister, Valerie, finally arrived from Seattle. She swept into the house like a cold wind, all business suits and barely contained fury. Gloria watched her embrace Danny with stiff arms, more obligation than love. Within an hour, Valerie was making phone calls to boarding schools. "The boy needs stability," she announced to the family lawyer in the living room, not bothering to lower her voice, though Danny was just upstairs. "I have my own life, my own career. I can't uproot everything for Michael's mess. A good boarding school will provide structure until this resolves." Gloria bit her tongue, continuing to dust shelves she'd already cleaned twice. Danny was 7 years old. He'd just lost his father to jail, and his mother had passed from cancer 3 years ago. The last thing he needed was to be shipped away to strangers. "Ma'am," Gloria spoke up, unable to stop herself. "Danny's been through so much." Maybe keeping him in his home with familiar people. Valerie looked at her as if she'd forgotten Gloria could speak. I'm sorry, and you are? Gloria Washington. I've been taking care of Danny since Mr. Carter's arrest. How generous of you. Valerie's tone dripped with condescension. But family decisions aren't really your concern, are they? I'm sure we can find someone appropriate to keep the house until the estate is settled. The dismissal was clear. Gloria felt her face grow warm, but she nodded and left the room. In the kitchen, she leaned against the counter, hands shaking. She'd known this was coming, known she couldn't stay forever, but hearing it spoken so coldly cut deep. That evening, while Valerie was out meeting with lawyers, Danny came to Gloria's room. His small face was streaked with tears. She's sending me away. I heard her on the phone. She said I'm too much trouble. Gloria pulled him into her arms. Oh, honey, I don't want to go. I want my dad. I want to stay here with you. His sobs shook his small frame. Something broke open in Gloria's chest. She'd raised 2 children on her own after her husband left, had scraped and struggled and prayed her way through poverty to give them better lives. Her daughter was in college now, her son in the military. She knew the weight of protecting a child when the world seemed intent on crushing them. Listen to me, she said softly, holding Danny's face in her hands. Your daddy loves you more than anything. I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to bring him home. But you have to be brave for me, okay? No matter what happens, no matter where they send you, you stay brave. Will you come visit me? The question shattered her. If they let me, baby. If they let me. But Gloria knew the truth. Once Valerie took control, once Danny was in some expensive boarding school, a housekeeper from the wrong side of town wouldn't be on the visitor list. She'd lose contact with the boy she'd come to love like her own. And Mr. Carter, locked away, would lose the son who was his only reason to keep fighting. That night, Gloria made a decision. She pulled out the USB drive and the copies she'd made, spread them across her small kitchen table, and started reading everything carefully. She used her daughter's college login to access legal databases, looked up terms she didn't understand, followed paper trails through documents that made her head spin. By 3 in the morning, she'd found it. Hidden in the email chains was a message from Richard to an offshore bank, dated just before Mr. Carter's arrest. The account numbers matched ones in other documents, accounts that had been attributed to Mr. Carter in the prosecution's evidence. But this email proved Richard had created them, controlled them, used Mr. Carter's forged signature to authorize transfers. It wasn't the whole picture. A good lawyer would need more to build a complete defense. But it was a crack in Richard's perfect crime. It was proof of the lie. Gloria sat back, exhausted and terrified. She had evidence that could potentially free an innocent man. But she was nobody, a black housekeeper with no legal standing, no credibility in court, no resources to fight powerful men and their expensive lawyers. If she came forward, Richard could destroy her. She could lose her job, her reputation, maybe even face charges for taking the USB drive. She thought of Danny's tear-stained face. She thought of Mr. Carter's kindness over 8 years. She thought of her own children, of the strength she taught them by example, to stand up even when you're afraid, especially when you're afraid. Gloria pulled out her phone and started making calls. She reached out to the one person she thought might listen, Mr. Carter's original defense attorney, before the fancy firm took over. She'd met him once at the house. A tired-looking public defender named Marcus Chen, who'd seemed genuinely troubled by the case before the family hired bigger guns. The phone rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. Hello? Mr. Chen? My name is Gloria Washington. I worked for Michael Carter, and I think I have evidence that could prove he's innocent. There was a long pause. Then, tell me everything. Marcus Chen arrived at Gloria's small apartment the next evening. briefcase in hand and skepticism in his eyes. He was younger than she'd remembered, maybe early 30s, with the exhausted look of a man who'd seen too many guilty clients claim innocence. But he sat at her kitchen table and listened as she explained everything. The USB drive, the emails, the offshore accounts. He studied the documents for over an hour, his expression shifting from doubt to concentration to something that looked like hope. "This is substantial," he finally said. "But there are problems. First, how you obtained this evidence could be challenged. Second, I'm no longer Mr. Carter's attorney. The family hired Goldstein and Associates, big firm, more interested in plea deals than fighting. Third, bringing this forward puts you at serious risk." "I know," Gloria said simply. "But a good man's in jail, and his son's about to be sent away because everyone thinks his father's a thief. That's not right." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You could lose everything. Your job, your reputation. Richard Brennan has connections, judges, prosecutors, media. He'll come after you. Then he comes after me." Gloria met his gaze steadily. "I've lost jobs before. I've been counted out and looked down on my whole life. But I've never looked away when someone needed help. Not starting now." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. He pulled out his laptop. "Okay, if we're doing this, we need to be smart. I can't officially represent Mr. Carter, but I can file an amicus brief friend of the court presenting new evidence. We'll need affidavits from you about where and when you found this drive. We'll need expert analysis of the digital forensics. And we'll need to move fast before Brennan realizes what we're doing." They worked through the night. Marcus made calls to former colleagues, digital forensics experts who owed him favors, investigators willing to work pro bono on a case that suddenly looked less simple. Gloria provided detailed accounts of everything she'd witnessed: meetings, conversations, Richard's suspicious behavior. By morning, they had the bones of something real. But Richard Brennan wasn't stupid. 2 days later, Gloria arrived at the Carter mansion to find the locks changed. When she called Valerie, the woman's voice was ice cold. "I've been informed by Mr. Brennan's attorneys that you removed property from the house without authorization. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Any attempt to enter the premises will be treated as trespassing." Gloria's stomach dropped. "What about Danny? Can I at least say goodbye?" "That won't be necessary. He's being enrolled in Pinehurst Academy next week. A fresh start is what he needs, not reminders of this difficult time." The line went dead. Gloria stood outside the locked gates of the mansion, staring up at Danny's bedroom window. She'd known this was coming, but the reality of it hit like a physical blow. She couldn't protect him anymore. Couldn't tuck him in. Couldn't promise him his father was coming home. Couldn't be there when he woke crying from nightmares. Marcus called an hour later with more bad news. "Goldstein and Associates filed a motion to suppress our evidence. They're claiming you stole the USB drive, and any information on it is inadmissible. Worse, Richard's team is pushing for a quick trial date, 45 days. They want this wrapped up before our investigation gains traction. Can they do that?" "They're doing it." The judge is sympathetic to moving the case along. "The prosecution's evidence looks airtight on the surface, and without that USB data, we don't have enough to create reasonable doubt." Gloria felt the walls closing in. She'd made herself Richard Brennan's enemy, lost her job, lost access to Danny, and now the evidence she'd risked everything to preserve might not even be admissible. She'd been so certain that truth would be enough, that justice would prevail if she just stood up. But the system wasn't built for people like her to win. That night, she sat in her apartment, bills spread across the table. Without her job at the mansion, without savings, she had maybe 2 months before she couldn't make rent. Her daughter called, worried. "Mama, come stay with me. You've done enough. Let the lawyers handle it." But Gloria couldn't let go. She thought of Mr. Carter in that jail cell, probably believing the world had abandoned him. She thought of Danny, being shipped off to boarding school, learning that the people you love disappear when things get hard. She pulled out her phone and did something that terrified her. She called the local news station. If the courts wouldn't listen to her because she was just a housekeeper, maybe the public would. Maybe someone out there would care that an innocent man was being railroaded while his partner walked free. The reporter who answered sounded bored until Gloria mentioned billionaire fraud and hidden evidence. "We can meet tomorrow." "But ma'am, you understand that going public means you can't go back. Everything in your life becomes fair game." "I understand," Gloria said. And she did. This was the point of no return. But sometimes, doing the right thing means walking through the fire, even when you know you'll get burned. The interview aired on a Thursday evening. Gloria sat in her living room, hands clasped tightly as she watched herself on the screen, a middle-aged black woman in her best church dress, speaking clearly and calmly about what she'd witnessed, what she'd found, and why she believed Michael Carter was innocent. The reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Kelly Rodriguez, had done her homework. She'd brought in forensic experts who reviewed the USB data on air, pointing out inconsistencies in the prosecution's timeline. She'd interviewed former Innovate Tech employees who spoke anonymously about Richard Brennan's questionable business practices. She'd shown courthouse footage of Mr. Carter's arrest alongside images of Richard standing confident and free. Sometimes, justice requires ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Kelly said into the camera, "Gloria Washington is a housekeeper who could have stayed silent. Instead, she's risking everything to expose what she believes is a grave injustice. The question now is, will anyone in power listen?" Gloria's phone exploded with calls. Some supportive, others vicious. Anonymous numbers left threatening messages. Someone posted her address online with the caption, "Fraud supporter lives here." But there were also messages of hope strangers offering donations. Lawyers volunteering their time. An advocacy group for wrongfully convicted people reaching out to Marcus Chen. The story went viral. By Friday morning, national news picked it up. By Saturday, protesters gathered outside the courthouse with signs reading "Free Michael Carter" and "Believe Gloria." The local DA's office released a terse statement saying they stood behind their prosecution. But Gloria noticed they looked uncomfortable during the press conference. And then Richard Brennan made his mistake. He called a press conference of his own, standing outside Innovate Tech headquarters with his lawyers flanking him. His face was composed, but Gloria could see the fury beneath it. "These accusations are baseless and insulting," he declared. Gloria Washington is a disgruntled former employee who stole company property and is now fabricating evidence to undermine a legitimate prosecution. Michael Carter betrayed this company, betrayed our employees, and betrayed the trust of investors. I won't let a publicity stunt distract from justice. But in his anger, he revealed something crucial. He mentioned specific emails from the USB drive emails that hadn't been made public in Gloria's interview. Emails only someone with intimate knowledge of the drive's contents would know about. Marcus caught it immediately. He called Gloria, excitement crackling in his voice. He just admitted he knows what's on that drive. How could he know unless he was looking for it? Unless he knew it existed because those are his emails? What does that mean? It means we just got leverage. It means reasonable doubt. It means we might actually have a chance. The tide was turning, slowly but unmistakably. An independent forensics firm offered to analyze all the evidence pro bono. A federal prosecutor, intrigued by the case's irregularities, quietly opened a parallel investigation into Richard's offshore accounts. The judge, responding to public pressure and mounting questions, agreed to postpone the trial by 60 days to allow new evidence to be properly reviewed, but the personal cost kept mounting. Gloria's landlord received concerned calls about having a controversial figure in the building. Her tires were slashed twice in 1 week. Someone sent her daughter threatening emails. The world Richard Brennan operated in had long arms and sharp teeth. Through it all, Gloria kept thinking of Danny. She'd managed to get one phone call through to Pinehurst Academy, but the headmaster coldly informed her she wasn't on the approved contact list. She wrote letters that went unanswered. She could only hope the boy knew she hadn't abandoned him, that she was fighting for his father. Then, 3 weeks after the interview aired, Gloria received an unexpected visitor. Valerie Carter stood at her apartment door, looking diminished somehow, less polished than before. "May I come in?" Gloria stepped aside, wary. Valerie sat stiffly on the worn couch, hands folded. "I owe you an apology. I was wrong about you. About a lot of things. What changed your mind?" "Danny ran away from the school yesterday. They found him at a bus station trying to buy a ticket back here. When they called me, all he said was that he needed to find you, that you were the only one still fighting for his dad." Valerie's voice cracked. "He's 7 years old and braver than I've been. Braver than I've been in years." Tears slipped down Valerie's cheeks. "I was so angry at Michael for getting into this mess, for dragging the family name through the mud. I didn't want to believe he could be innocent because then I'd have to face that I'd abandoned him when he needed me most. But you're not even family, and you've sacrificed everything." Gloria reached across and gently touched Valerie's hand. "He's a good man. He's worth fighting for. Will you help me get him out?" Valerie looked up, eyes red. "Please. I don't know how to do what you're doing, but I want to try. I want to be the sister he deserved all along." And just like that, Gloria wasn't alone anymore. The courtroom was packed on the morning of the emergency evidentiary hearing. Marcus had filed motions to introduce the USB evidence and compel Richard Brennan to testify about his knowledge of its contents. The media lined the hallway, cameras tracking every arrival. Gloria sat in the back row, hands clasped tightly in her lap, wearing the same church dress from her interview. Beside her sat Valerie and Danny. The boy had insisted on coming, had begged his aunt to let him see his father. When Michael Carter was led into the courtroom in prison orange, handcuffed and thin from weeks of incarceration, Danny's sharp intake of breath cut through Gloria's heart. Michael's eyes found his son immediately. For a moment, the hardened mask he'd been wearing cracked. He mouthed, "I love you," and Danny whispered it back, tears streaming down his face. Then Michael's gaze found Gloria. The gratitude in his eyes was so profound she had to look away, blinking back her own tears. The hearing began. Marcus presented the forensic analysis of the USB drive, showing how the metadata proved the emails were created before Mr. Carter's arrest, how they detailed Richard's scheme in his own words. An expert testified about the digital fingerprints linking the offshore accounts to Richard's devices, not Michael's. Then came Gloria's testimony. She walked to the stand on trembling legs, very aware of Richard Brennan's cold stare from across the room. The prosecutor tried to discredit her, asked about her employment history, her education level, implied she couldn't possibly understand the complex financial documents she'd found. But Gloria held steady. "I may not have a fancy degree," she said quietly, "but I know right from wrong. I know the man," she pointed at Michael Carter, "treated me with respect and dignity for 8 years. I watched him work himself sick trying to save his company. And I watched that man," she pointed at Richard, "walk through that house like a thief, counting stolen gold before anyone noticed it was missing." Objection. Richard's lawyer shot to his feet. "That's inflammatory and speculative." "Sustained," the judge said. But Gloria saw something in his expression. He was listening, really listening. Then Marcus called Richard Brennan to the stand. Richard came forward confident, assured, ready to dismiss these attacks on his character. But Marcus was methodical, patient. He walked Richard through the business dealings, the offshore accounts, the timeline of events. And then he played the clip from Richard's press conference. "Mr. Brennan, in this press conference, you referenced specific emails from the USB drive found by Ms. Washington. How did you know about these emails if, as you claim, you'd never seen the contents of that drive?" Richard's smooth expression faltered for just a moment. I must have been briefed by the investigators. The prosecution never released those specific emails publicly. They weren't part of the discovery until last week. So how did you know? Silence. Richard's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. The courtroom held its breath. I may have seen similar communications during my business dealings with Mr. Carter, but these emails are allegedly sent by you. From your account to offshore banks you claim you knew nothing about. Were you sending emails to yourself, Mr. Brennan? The trap closed. Richard's face reddened. I don't have to sit here and be accused by some housekeeper who doesn't understand basic business. Answer the question. Mr. Brennan, the judge said sharply. And in that moment, Richard Brennan made his final mistake. His composure shattered. He stood up, pointing at Gloria. You had no right to take that drive. That was private property. You're just a maid. You clean toilets. You don't understand what you're interfering with. The courtroom erupted. The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. But the damage was done. Richard had essentially admitted knowledge of the drive. Admitted it contained something he desperately wanted hidden. Admitted his contempt for the truth and for anyone brave enough to expose him. Marcus stood calmly amidst the chaos. Your Honor, the defense moves for immediate dismissal of all charges against Michael Carter and requests the court direct the district attorney to investigate Richard Brennan for fraud, embezzlement, and perjury. The hearing didn't end there. There were procedural motions. Arguments, legal wrangling that stretched through the afternoon. But Gloria could feel the shift. The judge's skepticism had turned to scrutiny, now aimed at Richard and the prosecutors who'd built their case on his fabricated evidence. 3 hours later, the judge made his ruling. I'm ordering Mr. Carter released on his own recognizance pending a full investigation into these new allegations. Furthermore, I'm directing the district attorney to open an investigation into Mr. Richard Brennan's business practices and potential misconduct in this case. The courtroom exploded with noise. Gloria felt Valerie grip her hand. Danny was crying, reaching for his father as the bailiffs removed the handcuffs. And Michael Carter, free for the first time in 6 weeks, swept his son into his arms and held him like he'd never let go. Through the crowd, across the chaos, Michael found Gloria's eyes. He mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Gloria nodded, tears streaming freely now. Because this moment of justice breaking through, this innocent man reunited with his child. This truth finally given voice. This was worth everything she'd sacrificed. The full investigation took 3 more months. During that time, federal prosecutors dismantled Richard Brennan's carefully constructed lies piece by piece. The offshore accounts revealed years of embezzlement. His forged documents unraveled under expert scrutiny. Former employees, no longer afraid, came forward with stories of intimidation and financial manipulation. Richard was arrested on 17 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The same prosecutors who'd been so certain of Michael Carter's guilt now worked overtime to build an airtight case against the man who'd actually committed the crimes. Richard's lawyers negotiated desperately, but the evidence was overwhelming, much of it from that single USB drive Gloria had found behind a picture frame. Michael Carter was fully exonerated. The charges were dropped with prejudice, and Innovate Tech's board issued a public apology, offering to reinstate him as CEO. The media covered it extensively. the wrongfully accused billionaire, the loyal housekeeper who saved him, the justice that almost failed. But for Gloria, the real victory came on a quiet Saturday morning when she pulled up to the Carter mansion in her old car. The gates stood open. Michael waited on the front steps, Danny bouncing excitedly beside him. "Welcome home, Miss Gloria," Danny called out, racing down to meet her. She caught him in a hug, laughing as he squeezed her tight. "I never left, honey." "Not really." Michael approached more slowly, and Gloria could see the weight of everything in his eyes. The fear he'd felt, the darkness he'd faced, the gratitude he struggled to express. "Gloria, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life. You saved my son. You risked everything. You treated me like I mattered," Gloria said simply. "For 8 years, you saw me as a person, not just a help. When the time came, I just returned the favor. It was more than a favor. It was courage I'm not sure I would have had in your position." He paused, then reached into his jacket. "Which is why I've done something. I hope you'll accept it." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check more money than Gloria had seen in her entire life. Enough to pay off her apartment, her daughter's college loans, set up her son for when he returned from the military. Enough to never worry about making rent again. "Mr. Carter, I can't. You can, and you will. It's not charity, Gloria. It's what you earned by standing up when everyone else looked away. It's what Danny's future is worth. It's what justice costs." His voice grew thick with emotion. "And it's not enough. It will never be enough." Gloria's hands trembled as she held the check. She thought of all the years she'd struggled, all the nights she'd prayed over bills she couldn't pay. She thought of the courage it had taken to stand up to powerful men, the fears she'd pushed through, the losses she'd accepted. "There's something else," Michael said. "Valerie's moving back to town. She wants to be more present in Danny's life, which means Danny doesn't need a nanny anymore." He smiled. "But he does need someone he can count on. Someone who'll tell him the truth, teach him what real integrity looks like. I'd like to offer you a different position, not as a housekeeper, but as family. Live here if you want or come and go as you please. Help me raise my son to be the kind of person who stands up for others the way you stood up for us." Gloria looked at Danny's hopeful face, at Michael's sincere expression, at this home that had become something more than just a workplace. She thought about her own children, grown now and making their own way. She thought about having the freedom to help, to guide, to love without fear of losing everything. "I'd be honored," she said softly. The months that followed brought a new kind of normal. Gloria moved into the guest house on the property, her own space, her own life, but close enough to be there when Danny needed her. She watched him heal from the trauma of those dark weeks, saw his joy return gradually, his trust rebuild. Michael restructured Innovate Tech with new oversight and transparent accounting. He established a foundation in Gloria's name, providing legal defense funds for people wrongfully accused who couldn't afford proper representation. "Because you showed me that justice shouldn't depend on how much money you have," he told her at the foundation's launch. Valerie became the aunt Danny deserved, present and loving and trying every day to make up for her initial failures. She and Gloria became unlikely friends, two women who learned that courage sometimes means admitting you were wrong. One evening, 6 months after the trial, Gloria sat on the back patio watching Danny play with his new puppy. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Michael came out with 2 glasses of sweet tea, settling into the chair beside her. "You know what I learned in that jail cell?" he said quietly. "I learned that everything I built, the money, the company, the reputation, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was whether I'd raised my son to know right from wrong, whether I'd treated people with dignity, whether I'd built a life worth defending. You already knew that, didn't you?" Gloria smiled, taking a sip of tea. I learned it the hard way, same as anyone. When you don't have money or power, you learn real quick that the only thing that lasts is how you treat people and whether you stand up when it matters. You taught me more in those few months than I learned in 20 years of business school. Michael watched his son play, his expression peaceful. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for being worth fighting for. They sat in comfortable silence as the evening deepened. Somewhere in the house, Valerie was making dinner, attempting to cook, at least, with mixed but enthusiastic results. Danny's laughter rang across the yard. The world felt right in a way it hadn't for a very long time. Gloria thought about the long road that had brought them here, the fear, the sacrifice, the moments when she'd almost given up. She thought about Richard Brennan in prison now, facing the same system he'd weaponized against an innocent man. She thought about justice, imperfect and hard-won, but real. But mostly, she thought about a 7-year-old boy who still gave her high fives every morning, who'd learned that good people fight for each other, who'd grow up knowing that courage doesn't require a title or a fortune, just a heart that refuses to look away from wrong. And she knew, with quiet certainty, that every risk had been worth it. Because this family rebuilt, this child protected, this truth vindicated. This was what happened when ordinary people chose to do extraordinary things. Not because they were heroes, but because they were human, and being human meant standing up, even when you stood alone. Asterisk, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Unbroken Grace Stories community. Where are you watching from?